My name is Mary Gall, and I am so excited to be here interviewing Kay Adams and talking about her new Amazon best-selling book, Bedside Witness: Stories of Hope, Healing, and Humanity. So I've known Kay for several years now, and I've kind of watched this book come to life, which is so exciting. And I want to tell you a little bit about Kay. You're going to learn more about her as you read in the book, but she's a clinical social worker, a dementia coach. She is now a published author and a speaker and a lifelong educator. She also is the owner of Compassion Works, her business where she gets to work with families and those going through this life-changing diagnosis of dementia and brain injuries, where she gets to help those families and the person with the brain injury go through these most traumatic times in their lives and situations, and she's there as counsel and advisor to be able to help them manage these turbulent times that they're going through and bring a peace and calm to them. And this book is wonderful. You'll get to hear her stories and her personality and just get to feel like Kay is sitting across the table from you telling you these stories. So with that being said, I want to dive in. Kay, thank you for writing this book. It's an amazing book. I can't wait for everybody to read it. And, you know, it's kind of a taboo subject. So you're talking about maybe the end of life or going through some of these life-changing stages. So tell me about the topic and tell me about why you chose to write about this topic.
Well, so I'm a clinical social worker, and I've spent over 20 years as a medical social worker. So over 8 of those years were in hospice, and then a lot of those years were in Kaiser. And we were in Kaiser where I assisted families that were impacted by dementia for many years. So I really just have a passion around this disease. And so I have spent a very long time supporting patients and families living with life-limiting illnesses of all kinds. But the one that gets my heart the most is dementia. And so in my book, about 2/3 of the stories have to do with that particular kind of illness in all different kinds of case scenarios. Because what I found through my work is that it's different. If you are caregiving for somebody with cancer, for instance, but their brain is still very much intact and they can communicate successfully and all that, it's very, very different than caring for someone with a late or end stage like Alzheimer's disease, where they can no longer talk, can no longer communicate, can no longer care for themselves in any way. It's a different kind of grief, and it's a different kind of support people need. And so I really try to validate the life of caregivers that I work with over the years, who've been my best teachers, in this book. And I'm hoping that it resonates with the people that read it.
Great, great. Yes, having experienced that as well. My mom had Alzheimer's and went through that disease, and it's so hard for the loved ones around that person. It's scary for the person going through it, but it's also hard for the people, and you mentioned they do have to grieve kind of as each level of loss applies to that
Absolutely.
person, to their loved one's life. So, and the stories in this book walk you through that. And you may be thinking, I don't want to read a book about that sad thing, but trust me, this book is written in a way that you will find yourself smiling, laughing, crying several times, but you'll feel like you're connected to other people. So if you're a caregiver or you know someone who is, which is everyone on the planet, right, knows somebody who's caring for somebody that's going through an illness or maybe a long-term brain, life-changing illness with their brain, then it's really, these stories are, like the subtitle says, stories of hope, healing, and humanity. We're all in this together. You're not alone. And that's what this book made me feel like. Even though my mom's passed away a couple of years ago, I could relate to what these people are going through in the stories. So tell me a little bit about the book, because your style is very conversational and there are little vignettes. So why did you choose to write the book this way?
Well, I don't know if I chose it or it chose me, because the way my social work brain works is I catalog people's stories. I just always have. And what happened a lot with those stories are, these are the people that, some of these stories happened, 15, 20 years ago. But it's, for whatever reason, they stood out for me because it was really poignant. It was really sad. It was hilarious. It was moving. It was inspirational. Something about it stayed in my heart all this time. And a lot of times what happens is I just get a one-liner stuck in my head. So for instance, one of my stories is called When You're Dead, You're Dead. And there was a gentleman that I took care of in hospice who had cancer. And he was just this force of nature, just this wonderful man who I just came to love. And we had him on hospice about 6 months before he died. But he was an atheist and he didn't believe there was any afterlife. And so he used to say all the time, "Kay, when you're dead, you're dead."
Mhm.
Like that was the end. He didn't want to have a chaplain come in for support because what's the point of that? Because when you're dead, you're dead.
Right.
But over the course of his illness, that all started to change, right? And he started to wonder, I wonder if you really are, when you're dead, you're dead, or is there something else? So
Yeah.
that line has just stayed with me all these years, you know? And
Yeah.
so I was like, and I just have these little snippets of stories in my head. And as it turns out, it worked out perfectly to write them in vignette form because that's about how much I remember about these different
Yes.
instances. And so it worked out perfectly kind of for the formula of the book.
Great, great. And like I said, you write in such a way that we feel like we're there in the room with you when you're having these conversations with these people. And it's just so inspiring and tugs at your heartstrings in all the right ways. It is funny, it's insightful. It's not a how-to book on how to deal with this.
Not at all.
That's what your coaching business is about, right? I know
Yeah.
you have a workshop that you do that helps families get through the how-to. This book is more about just, I see you, I hear you. It's caregivers around the world being recognized in many different stories about their
Yeah.
families. So again, thank you for writing this book. Um, I know we need to keep this short and sweet today. So what do you want us to know about dementia, about aging with grace, about caregivers? What would you like your message to be about people to go read this book?
Well, I really think that, I mean, we are at a time in this world where dementia was an epidemic before we were living in a pandemic. There's over 120 different kinds of dementias that we know about, probably a handful that are most common. And of those, Alzheimer's is the most common of those handful. And it's currently the fifth leading cause of death for people 65 and older in our country. So it's a big one, right? And
Mhm.
so if you don't know somebody now who's living with dementia, you will. Give it 5 minutes or a day or a week or a month, you will be impacted either yourself for going through this illness or having a friend, coworker, loved one, neighbor. Somebody's going to be going through it. So I think it's imperative that we try to put ourselves in the shoes of that person. You know, my favorite movie of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. Got to walk a mile in somebody's shoes because it is not the same for every illness, going through it or being a care partner. So my hope with this book was that people can get a glimpse inside the windows of someone's world about what it's like to live with it and what it's like to love somebody with this illness, so that you can have compassion and empathy and understanding, and most of all, so you can show up for them when they need you
Yes.
most.
Fantastic. I love that message. Like I said, having gone through it with our family, with our mom, it's such a nice, this book gives us that sense that we're not alone, right? There, like you said, everybody knows somebody or will know somebody with this terrible disease. And so the stories of hope, healing, and humanity. Bedside Witness. Go and grab your copy today. It's already an Amazon bestseller. It should be in bookstores near you anytime soon. If it's not, go in your bookstore and request one. Make sure you grab a copy, grab a couple copies, and give one to a caregiver that you know. They will love you for it. So thank you so much for taking your time today, Kay, to talk about your book. Thank you for taking the time and effort to write these stories and capture and recognize all of the families and the caregivers that were in these stories that are so powerful for all of us to read and connect to.
Thank you, Mary. It was my honor.